Johnny Mac, Jody Mac here on Birds 365 on the Eagles aren't doing anything Tuesday. 30 out of 32 teams in the NFL are. One of them is not. It's the Philadelphia Eagles, but we'll find stuff to talk about with the Birds, and we will do it with our pal Tommy Lawlor from Eagles Blitz. That's IGGLES Blitz.com. Longtime Eagles writer, good enough to give us a couple of minutes here today. Tommy, John and I were just talking about the whole flexing on Thursday night for Amazon and the NFL going to streaming. I get it. It's the future, and it's coming in waves, and we're not going to be able to stop it. But are they just turning their nose up at the fans, and are fans just going to sit there and take it because they just can't give up the love affair with the NFL?
Are the fans going to take it? Yes, they are. Right? We know that. But I heard your discussion before coming on, and there's a lot of truth in what you guys are talking about. And it's complicated when you run a business. You always have to look to the future, because if you just say, okay, we've reached a good point, we're going to stay here, stagnation is just not good for business. You always have to be growing, evolving, looking to the future. At the same time, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, right? And it feels like the NFL, in their quest for every frickin' nickel they can get their hands on, just steamroll over to fans, over anybody that's in their way, just to get that extra penny. And it's so weird because, as John was pointing out, every other league in sport is struggling on some level. The NFL is just raking in money, and yet they're the ones the most obsessed with making more money.
Yeah.
At some point, you'd think they'd say, what's healthy for the sport long term? Because there's going to reach a saturation point where people don't care and they do start to go away. And I don't know when that's going to happen, but it's going to happen at some point.
Well, I mentioned I got a couple responses on social media, and Tommy, they're like, well, they'll care when there's 5,000 people in the stands. Well, that's the point. Yeah, they would care, but there's not going to be 5,000. There, especially in this town, Philadelphia. I mean, they're going to sell that place out, and they know it. And until you actually back up that talk as a fan base, and I don't see it happening anytime soon, Tommy. I will say that.
No, I totally agree. I mean, listen, the last time that I didn't watch an Eagles game, 1 second of an Eagles game, was the season finale of 1994. Oof. Okay, so there are people like me that are going to they're playing their lives around. You tell your family, starting the first week of September and end of February, don't count on seeing me a lot. Sundays I'm going to be, and now Mondays and Thursdays and whatever else, you're going to be sitting there watching your Eagles games. And there's going to be a certain point when enough people just go, who knows where this is going to stop? Are they going to introduce, hey, let's work in a Tuesday? Now they've got the Black Friday game. It used to be special watching pro football, where you had your games on Sunday, and then Monday night was a big thing. Then they added Sunday night. There was a time back in the early 80s when Sunday night games, there were 3 or 4 a year, and it was a big deal. Oh, hey, they're playing on Sunday night. That's kind of cool. Let's watch that. Yeah. Then all of a sudden it became Sunday nights and Monday nights. And, then there were Saturday games for a little while. Now they're just beating us to death with Thursday, Saturday, who knows? And like I say, at some point, they're going to kill the golden goose. I don't know if that's going to be in a year, 5 years, 10 years, but at some point they'll kill it because they keep stretching it too thin and not thinking about what's healthy for the sport. They just think about what's healthy for the checkbooks.
I agree. The overreach, adding days, I think is dangerous. And I'm with you. I think they're going too far. When you start talking about, now we got Friday, we had Thursday, Christmas is
3 games on Christmas.
There's 3 games on Christmas. When Christmas is on a Tuesday, are they going to play on a Tuesday?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, that I agree with. They might be stretching. Jody and I are big wrestling fans. It's on every day. I can't watch it. I can't. It's too much. You do. I think you're 100% right. That's really where they need to pull it back and say, you know what? All right, Thursday, that's ingrained. That's it, right? Sunday, Monday, Thursday. Occasionally, when college football's over, I'll even give you some Saturday games.
Right.
That's it.
But part of what makes football special is that each game is kind of like an event.
Yeah.
So you have the game itself. There's the lead up to the game where we always, we're doing all kinds of game previews. We're doing stories. We're hearing interviews. Then there's the day after, maybe the 2 days after, you're dissecting the game. What happened? Who missed a tackle? What a great catch. If you start to fill in every day of the week, then you're going to drown in information. And all of a sudden, the one thing you don't want is in the NFL is for people to go, there's an NFL game on, I don't care because I've seen enough of it. Right. And so coming out of as a kid who grew up in the late 70s and early 80s, anytime the NFL was on, I didn't care who it was. Monday Night Football. I watched Monday Night Football as a kid. It didn't matter who was on. That was Monday Night Football. You watched it. Now, Monday Night Football, if it's a crappy game, I'm not going to lie to you. I'll watch a few minutes of it, but I may sit there and put it on the second TV, and on the first TV, I'm watching something on Netflix. Because there's so many games now. Like say there's an oversaturation, and if you watch as much as I do, there's times you get a little burnout. And you go, I can't deal with when the Titans had a game last year where they threw like 3 passes in the second half and they lost in a brutal game. You're just like, I don't. This is not good to watch. Why am I a slave to the TV? Let me choose something healthy to watch it. Let me go watch some highlights from the 1993 season or something, insane like that.
And talk about nitpicking. Oh, I'll do a fair share of it right here. And I seem to be more put off by this than either of you two guys. You're accepting the future as it is. I got too big a TV down here that I can't have a second TV the way you got the Lawlor set up at your house. Here's what bothers me about Amazon. You can't just flip to the other game. If you're watching at a baseball game or a basketball game or whatever on your TV, you got to get out of Amazon and then you get to your game. And then when you want to go back to Amazon, you got to go to the Amazon homepage and then individual. And it takes a while. I got that remote control in my hand. I want to go game, and just go back and forth. And you do that with cable. You can't do that with streaming. Again, the NFL saying, here's what we think of our fans. Sorry about that if you can't watch it the way you want to watch it. And you got to pay extra to watch on Amazon, which is a service. Again, they're just turning in. And I know the whole, Jody, it's 20 seconds, shut up aspect of it. But yeah, it's 20 seconds. It's just going to tick me off no end. And I actually get paid to talk about sports. Other people who don't are not going to put up with it as much as I'm forced to do it.
Yeah, and we're going to run into some really strange things here. So, I live in North Carolina, so I'm not in Philadelphia. So I rely on DirecTV to watch the Eagles games. Well, this year that's going to switch to YouTube TV.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to get YouTube TV apparently and figure out how that works. And we know when streaming there is a delay. So I can't be on Twitter during a game or else I'm going to know what's going to happen ahead of the play that I'm watching live.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
so
supposedly live. It's not quite live.
Right. So it's going to be a strange world for me as I try to get used to that. And luckily I do have multiple TVs that I watch on Sunday because I always want to see more than just the one at the Eagles game. But I'm going to have to figure out, about watching multiple TVs with YouTube TV. I got a lot of stuff to learn this summer about how all this stuff works. I've
and YouTube had
since 1998, so now I've got to learn something new.
It was just last week, I think YouTube TV screwed up an NBA game or something, and people were kind of incensed about it. And if that happens with the NFL, oof.
Oh, they don't know what angry is.
Yeah.
Listen, if I got a chance to watch Boston Scott when the Eagles are up 28 points and he's running the ball on second down with 19 seconds left, I want to see that play. They better not take that play away from me.
Yeah. Well, but to Jody's point, and I think I'm like him. I don't like it. We're older though. I do acknowledge younger people, man. Like I got big screens all over my house, right? And when some kids come over and friends and their kids, they're never watching the TVs. They're sitting there with their phones, watching their phones. They're watching stuff, but they're not watching the big TVs. They just consume a different way. And unfortunately, as people like us go away, people like that are who they're trying to reach. And they don't care about stuff like Jody just said. They're on their phones anyway. They're not watching.
Yeah, but aren't
TV,
they
big
the
screen
next
TV.
generation of fans, John?
Well, yeah, but that's how they consume. They
Well,
consume.
then
in
why are
little
they bending
clips
over
and-
backwards for Amazon? Are they consuming on their Amazon on their phones?
Sure,
Yes.
absolutely.
Absolutely. More so than us. And we're doing it on the big screen. No, they pick up the phone. Bang. Amazon right there.
So,
That's
so
how
there's
they do it.
there's a great filmmaker named Darren Aronofsky, and he was talking to Quentin Tarantino about movies, and Tarantino asked him something about one of his films, and he said, "Well, so many people watch movies on their phones now that we have to keep that in mind when we're
Yeah.
composing shots and coming up with ideas." And Quentin Tarantino looked at him and said, "That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard." Right? and this is the football version of that discussion.
Yeah.
Right? It's absolutely true. I mean, listen, the three of us were watching TV back in the day when you'd have a 18-inch Sylvania that the families gather around, and the football is it looks like an ant. And now we have these 65 and 70-inch TVs, huge, clear. And what do people do? They're going away from that to watching on a freaking phone that's smaller than the TVs the three of us were watching back in 1979.
Yeah.
And it's just mind-boggling sometimes, but that's technology. That's the world we live in, and the NFL is smart to embrace parts of that and to reach out, because we're not the future. The three of us aren't going to be around for the next 50 years. Well, I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
you guys will.
One last,
Yeah.
you're talking to a couple of guys who are up there. One
They,
last
they do
technical.
have to be smart about the future. So I think they're wise to looking at it on a certain level, but they also have to be careful, because I don't know if those people are going to be the kind of sports fans that our generation
Yeah.
was,
I agree
where you
with
woke
that
up
too.
and
Yeah.
you open the newspaper and you couldn't wait to read the box score. I mean, listen, back in the day, being a person who grew up in North Carolina, I'd watch Monday Night Football in part to see Howard Cosell do the halftime highlights, so that I could see highlights from
Yeah.
games
Oh,
that I
yeah.
hadn't seen a thing of on the weekend.
Yeah.
You know,
But
there might be the Cowboys and the Chargers played on the West Coast, and that game wasn't shown in North Carolina. So if I want to see a clip of that game, I got to listen to Howard Cosell do it at halftime.
and
So
you are 100% right there. There's a whole generation of people go, what do you mean you had to watch one show to get the highlights? Why didn't you just go to your phone? The highlights are always there on your phone. Why? The one that still to my mind just makes me laugh out loud, like John mentioned, young kid over the house visiting. I think I uttered the phrase, and I had to get up and change the TV. And they said, like, what do you mean you had to get up? I said, I had to go over to the TV and change the channel. Where was the remote control? There was no such thing as a remote control. The young man looked at me like I had three heads. What do you mean there was no remote control? Oh, yeah. Technology has changed a lot of things in our life. All right, Tommy, let's take it back out onto the field. We talked enough technology and fans getting screwed and streaming and everything else. Let's talk about football. They're going to start the season, and according to Peter King, our buddy at NBC, the Eagles have no weaknesses. The team without a weakness. He did his first power ranking of the year, 1 through 32. Eagles on top in a category by themselves. I can't find a weakness. And a little hyperbole there from Peter King, but can you make as bold a statement about the Eagles that there's no weakness to be found?
Of course not. That's just, that's crazy. I mean, there's a potential weakness on the team in linebacker, right? We have Nakobe Dean and Nick Morrow. Nakobe's the guy who's got the talent. Nick's got the guy who's got the experience. But they're both question marks. Nakobe, I think, is going to pan out and be a good player for the Eagles, but there's no guarantee. I've been wrong on players before. Nick Morrow, we don't know what's going to happen with him. He's been an effective weak side linebacker, but he struggled when he's tried to play middle linebacker. We don't know where the Eagles are going to play him yet. For some reason, nobody's asked Sean Desai, is Nakobe going to be your middle linebacker or your weak linebacker? So we don't know quite yet how.
On our defense, Tommy, we just met the guy. It's been,
you had 10 minutes with it. What do you want, John? Come on.
Yeah, we had to get through the philosophy stuff before we can get into the. We're going to see him next week for a little window during OTAs. They'll finally hit phase 3. Jody mentioned they're doing stuff. They're still in phase 2. They're working out.
Sure.
But all the other teams have advanced to phase 3. They'll advance to phase 3 next week. We'll get to see helmets. We'll get to see where Nakobe's lining up. he's going to be the middle linebacker. I think it's pretty evident.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where's middle linebacker play? When they used to have three linebackers on the field, I could determine which one was the middle. There's one on the left, one on the right. The guy between them was the middle linebacker. The Eagles never have three linebackers on the field. So how do you know who's the middle linebacker?
Well, he's tricky. Yeah. Well, typically the strong side of the formation will tell you, and then Nicholas Moore will be on the weak side of the formation, and you'll see Nakobe. He'll be the one moving back and forth more than Nakobe Dean. But when you talk about nickel defenses, and I do think people get too caught up in personnel, and because we're going through this, I don't want to say positionless player, but I am interested to see how, are we going to see a bunch of three safeties? Is Terrell Edmonds going to be playing linebacker? It's like I always say offensively, Tommy, I'll say, people say, well, the Eagles are in 11 personnel, but they're playing an empty set. So essentially, Dallas Goedert's playing receiver. Kenny Gainwell's playing receiver. They're empty. Then maybe they motion back in and Kenny's a running back. But, the labeling system, I think people get too caught up in. To me, it's about what they're doing on a particular play. But as far as this scheme, and we've talked about it a lot, Sean Desai said all the right things when it comes to Philadelphia. You've been following this team for a long time, as you mentioned, and people want to hear. He used the term grit and aggression and all that. Now, I've yet to hear the defensive coordinator say, no, we want to stand back. We don't want to be aggressive. But I think he said all the right things. But if he shows up and he plays the same, all right, we're going to limit explosive plays, light boxes. Is that going to pass muster?
Yeah, I think it would be fine. The defense last year was good for most of the year. They just, in the Super Bowl, had no answer for Kansas City, obviously. And the new thing that's in vogue in the NFL is the light box and avoiding the big plays. So if they want to go with that philosophy, that's fine. But part of what you have to do, if you're going to do that, is use your guys up front correctly. And I think when you have Jordan Davis, and this year it'll probably be Fletcher Cox be the guys eating up blocks more than anybody. Eventually Jalen Carter will be that guy. It frees your linebackers to make some plays, and it keeps people from getting to them. And so if you want to play a light box, you've got to have the guys up front do their part. When you have guys, the Eagles attacking up the field last year up front and playing a light box, that's where things get a little dangerous. And it was great for Javon Hargrave to have 11 sacks and be so good at rushing the passer. But one of his weaknesses was run defense. And we saw that in the Super Bowl. There's some clips, if you'll watch, he just got blocked completely out of the picture and couldn't do what he needed to do. And so that's where maybe, that you look at when they brought in Moro Ijomo, that guy did a good job as a two-gap defensive tackle at Texas. Obviously, Jalen Carter is big and strong enough to do whatever he wants on the football field. Jordan Davis can do that. Fletcher Cox can do that. So they have guys now that can maybe eat up blocks. And if you're going to go light in the box, you've got to have those defensive linemen who their mindset needs to go from making plays to disrupting plays and allowing the linebackers to make the plays. And so they can do that schematically, but they've got to have a buy-in from everybody, and roles have to be clearly defined. And I think that's where things got a little hazy last year. And obviously teams, we go back to the Commanders game when the Eagles first lost. They ran all over the Eagles for parts of that game. The Texans ran over the Eagles, the Cowboys. So you can go with that philosophy, but you got to execute it just right. And the Eagles didn't do that in some key losses.
Yeah.
If they have a similar defense to the one they had last year, and that's what I came away from my first Sean Desai gathering with the media, and we'll certainly judge more by what they actually do when they get on the field. Isn't that a good way to judge? Actually see them do it rather than what they say. So this is kind of a preemptive question, but I'll give it to you just the same. Safety. If they're going light boxes, it does put more pressure on the safety to be as flexible as possible. And last year, both Marcus Epps and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson did the job for the Eagles. Coming in this year, fairly high, but not a first-round draft pick rookie. Reed Blankenship, nice job filling in, but not a whole bunch on tape that you can point to. Terrell Edmonds, who, yes, has been a starter for the Steelers, but they let walk out the door because he didn't quite live up to his draft status. Are they good enough at safety right now, Tommy? Or do you think that's another position that Howie Roseman will be looking to upgrade after June 1st, right before the season starts, late cuts? How do you like their strength or depth at the safety position right now?
I like safety. I do. I think Reed Blankenship, people say, oh, he only started 4 games last year. He was a UDFA. He was hurt for part of the time. But if you go back, they had Anthony Harris last year, right? At a certain point, they brought him back. And they played Reed Blankenship over Anthony Harris. Harris was the guy who had the experience, knew the scheme. And yet they were sitting there saying, oh, we're going to play Reed Blankenship. That's the guy we want on the field. And in Sidney Brown, I think Sidney Brown can be I think he's got a potential to be a good NFL player. So those guys I like, I really do. And we'll see what happens with Justin Evans and Terrell Edmonds. They've got some competition here. That's one of the things they don't have at linebackers competition. At safety, they've got 4. They've really got 5 guys battling for 2 spots or 3 spots. But it's just a matter of seeing who wins. Now, listen, they could all fall flat on their face. We've seen that happen a time or two in Eagles history. But I think they've got some good pieces in place, and I think safety could be better than some people realize.
It's technology difficulty day. I just left. Boom. I got a black screen and I was gone. So I didn't get all of what you said, Tommy. But from the safety perspective, I want to talk about the back 7 because we were talking linebackers before I went into the ether. And you mentioned the line, which is, I think we all acknowledge, is really talented. We'll see how quickly Jalen Carter can get up to speed, but even so, tremendous depth, both on the edge and inside. But you mentioned, and you're right. I mean, guys like Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, they have to, in this particular scheme, they have to tie up blockers and allow the linebackers to make plays, and even the safeties, Terrell Edmonds, Sidney Brown, Reed Blankenship. If that's the case, why are the Eagles saying, TJ Edwards, Kaiser White? They're not great players, but they were effective in this particular scheme, and saying, we can make do at linebacker when those are the guys who are going to be have to making plays. I'm with you with Nakobe Dean. Tremendous upside, tremendous ceiling, but he played 34 snaps last year. And Nicholas Morrow, not a tremendous upside. Hopefully experience can get him through. Are the Eagles devaluing linebacker too much? Have they gone too far with the devalued aspect of that position?
It's a fair question. And I think, obviously, a big part of this is just simple economics. You have to go cheap somewhere. You cannot go cheap everywhere. And or you cannot go expensive everywhere. And so the Eagles said, you know what, we're going to take a chance. We got a rookie, well, now a second-year linebacker into Kobe Dean, and then they would got a guy off the. I mean, Kaiser White didn't make a bunch of money last year, but he obviously made more than Nick Morrow is scheduled to make this year. So they are, with the 2 guys they have projected as starting linebackers, you're looking at what, $2.5-3 million total salary.
Yeah.
And you look at TJ Edwards is making what, $6.5 million this year. So really, it's economics, and you've got to be a little frugal somewhere. And if they're going to pay Jason Kelsey big money, and they're going to pay the defensive lineman big money, and they're going to pay Lane Johnson big money, and Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown, you've just got to go cheap somewhere. You've got to, in a poorly worded way, say you got to neglect somebody. Right. So linebackers, where they feel like they can maybe have that position where they can go with younger, cheaper guys and get effective play if they limit what they have to do. And again, Nakobe Dean's key to this, because I really think they like him and they want him on the field.
Yeah. Yeah. They do.
So if they get good play out of Nakobe Dean, all of a sudden we're going to see a whole new slate of articles. Howie Roseman, genius. He's got this great linebacker for 3 more years at cheap money, and part of it'll be pure luck that he fell to that point in the draft.
No, 2 more years because he was a third-round draft pick. He's only got a 4-year contract, not
You're
a
right.
5.
You're right.
I
Just
said
remember that.
enjoy N'Kobe Dean if he does play well.
Exactly.
'cause,
That's
It's a
that's what I would do.
catch-22.
yeah,
Absolutely. Because
That's
the
what I
better
was
they
getting
play,
at.
they're like to say, how do we keep all these guys?
yeah,
It's a good
yeah.
problem to have, but it is a legitimate problem.
Agreed. All right, Tommy, I want your take on a couple teams in the NFC. I mentioned Peter King's got the Eagles as the number 1 power ranked team. Bunch of other media outlets came out with their rankings. Eagles are up there. They're either second or third in everybody's power rankings. Peter's got them at number 1. Our buddy Jimmy Kemsky over at Philly Voice put one out, and he had the New York Giants at 9th in the ratings in the NFC. Last time I checked, the Giants were in the NFC Final Four because they made the playoffs and won a playoff game. Yeah, they came in here to Philadelphia, got their tails kicked by the Eagles, but they were in the Final Four, and Kempsky's got them power ranked 9th in the NFC. Johnny Mac thinks the Giants are going backwards off their 9-6-1 season. Yeah, I know. They were 9-7-1. But when you give up the final game against the Eagles and Webb is your quarterback, I don't count that as a loss. I did the same thing for the Eagles the year before. I didn't say they were 9-8. I said they were 9-7 because they didn't even try. They played the JV the last game of the season against Dallas. So I factor that in. Giants massive overachievers and coming back to the pack next year, or yeah, they were legit Final Four. 9 is a little disrespectful.
I'm going to do the worst thing possible and say there's a little bit of both in that.
Okay.
Right. So they've got a talented base they've built. They built a what potentially could become a good offensive line. Saquon Barkley is a terrific running back. They've added some players at receiver. Daniel Jones is no longer a turnover machine. And the defense, did some good things last year. But they also won a lot of games where the opponent, I would watch the Giants, seemed like I watched them several weeks in a row. And the opposing team, the fourth quarter, 5 minutes to go in a close game, you'd watch the quarterback just throw the ball up for grabs, or somebody would fumble something, or one of the Jaguars players just had some indescribable moment where we didn't get the first down. He went down early or went out of bounds. And so the opponents, it felt like they were losing games to the Giants as much as the Giants were winning them. That stuff catches up. You don't catch lucky breaks 2 years in a row. That stuff kind of evens out. So where the Giants were in good position to take advantage of those mistakes, I just don't know that teams are going to cave into them the way they did last year. So I think you'll see them take a little bit of a step back in terms of having some of those little weird plays go their way. But I think the overall Giants roster is better, and those guys now have the confidence to think that they can win. They expect to win, and that is important in the NFL.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes I think I'm too hard on the Giants because I got to watch them play the Eagles every year. And the Eagles have destroyed that team. People can bring up week 18, but as Jody pointed out, that game didn't look, it mattered for the Eagles and they didn't play well, but Jalen Hurts was coming off the injury. And if the playoff game didn't come to existence, they beat them 48-22 and 38-7. It's hard to take that team seriously. And the Eagles have I think they've won 10 straight at Lincoln Financial. They dominated them as a whole for years and years and years. They are getting better, but I just don't buy that team. I don't think they've reached a level from a talent perspective. I look at Washington, and that's where I want to go with you. From 2 through 53, I think Washington remains the better football team, just talent-wise. They have Sam Howell, though, completely unproven. Do they have a chance to surprise if Sam Howell's okay? The Washington Commanders.
Yeah, there's some talent there for sure, and there's no question about that. Sam Howell is a guy that I watched. I'm living down here in North Carolina. I watched quite a few of his games in college and was shocked when he fell to the 5th round. At the beginning of the season, there was talk about would he potentially push for a first-round pick.
Yeah.
And so sliding to the 5th, that was kind of wild. His ability to run and make plays, throw the ball vertically. Washington has some good receivers for him to work with. A lot of it's going to be that offensive line. Are they good enough? And do they have the guys to protect him in open holes for that run game? The defense has some good pieces in place. Last year, Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen were dominant defensive tackles. Can both guys stay healthy and play at that same level this year? And Washington just always seems to be a good team, a pretty good team that has some problem they can't overcome, whether it's bad quarterback play, key injuries on the defense. There's just always, they feel like perpetually a 7-7, or I guess a 7-10, 8-9 team. I was going to say 7-9 going back to the old days, but they always feel like they're one of those 7 or 8 win football teams. That's too good to be bad, but too bad to be good. In some ways, that's the worst thing you can do, right? Because you're always picking in the middle of the first round, and you're not developing, or you're not bringing in the difference makers to put you over the top. And part of that's a credit to Ron Rivera being a good coach and not letting them bottom out. But yet again, the lack of a good quarterback has really hurt them, because this is a quarterback league, and being solid and what have you, that stuff's just going to get you to a certain point. And that's what the Giants are going to find out. Not losing games can only get you so far. At a certain point, you need your quarterback to be a playmaker, right? Daniel Jones is no longer the turnover machine he was, but at some point you've got to have a guy who can make those throws to help you win football games. We don't know if Daniel Jones can do that for the Giants with the consistency. And we don't know if Sam Howell can do it, period. We saw one game out of him last year, and he showed some good things, but we need to see what he can do on a regular basis in the NFL.
Yeah, and a Giants-Commanders quarterback comparison, I would say Daniel Jones was a first-round pick who plays like a third-round pick, and I would say Sam Howell's a fifth-round pick who plays like a sixth-round pick. Not a fan. Don't think he's going to be able to play. Here's the role that Sam Howell should be filling. The new emergency quarterback in the National Football League. Yesterday, the NFL added back the emergency quarterback. He's got to be on the 53, but you can have a 46 player who could potentially play on game day, but he's got to be your emergency quarterback. You can only put him in if your first 2 guys are hurt. They used to have this in play in the NFL. They did away with it. They relaxed it. You can play someone else other than the emergency quarterback. No, quarterback is the most important position, and you should have some latitude there. I like the fact that they've re-added it. I know Eagle fans are getting a kick out of this because they think, oh, this is just San Francisco from last year's championship game. The poor 49ers, that's why they got screwed. We got to do something to protect against this. I don't care why they came back with it. It's a good thing, and that's what Sam Howell should be. He should be a emergency quarterback. That's what he is in this league.
That is disrespect, right?
I am disrespecting Sam Howell. I do not think he's a starting quarterback. You think either one of you think he's going to start 17 games for the Commanders this year?
I don't know, but I'm not that down on him.
So if you watch Sam, he throws a good.
That's why you're a Carolina guy.
Yeah.
Now you got a quarterback who can watch this year. May is the real thing. He's going to be a star in the NFL, not Sam Howell.
Well, Sam Howell, though, I think you're underselling him. He's a legitimately talented player. He throws a very good deep ball. Carolina had a dynamic offense a couple of years ago with him throwing the football. And as a senior, it's funny, he became a runner. And they had lost a couple of receivers, and he became a guy that he ran for like 10 touchdowns as a senior. And some of those, he's running over guys and making plays. So he's got the ability to make plays with his legs. He's got a solid arm. Listen, is he a guy that you want as your starting quarterback? I'm not ready to go there, but I think he's got the tools to develop into an effective starting quarterback. I just don't know. Again, you're not looking for effective. That's the guy who wins you 6, 7, 8 games. You're looking for Jalen Hurts, the playmaker, who can lead you to the Super Bowl. Sam Howell isn't that guy, but can he become an effective starter? I think that's possible.
I'm surprised they committed to him and stuck with it. That's what I'm surprised with. I mean, I don't know. I mean, as you mentioned, Tommy, look, he was, I would say, a consensus first-round pick coming into his final college season. And then all of a sudden things happen. We see it all the time. And all of a sudden, now he's labeled, right? We talk about labels. He's a fifth-round pick. And a lot of people say, well, he can't play because he's a fifth-round pick. Now, Tom Brady being the obvious example, that's not going to happen. But there are quarterbacks that come out of nowhere. Maybe he's one of them. I don't know much about Sam Howell other than I didn't love the North. Now, you saw it all the time. I didn't love the North Carolina offense. It was very simplified, if I remember, a lot of RPO stuff. But that's what they're running in the NFL. So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Listen, the Commanders believed in him enough to say, let's go with that guy. To those of us on the outside, we say, we don't really get that. There was quarterbacks available to go after, take a chance on one of these guys. They didn't. They stayed put. Normally, I'd say that tells you, hey, listen, they believe in this guy. They know something we don't. Let's see how it turns out. But because it's the Commanders, you say, is that just them being the Commanders? They haven't gotten the quarterback position right. I don't know how long. So they don't have a good history for us to sit there and say, okay, when you see Green Bay going with Jordan Love, Green Bay's gotten quarterback right for a long time.
Yeah.
They even though they've changed scouts and they've changed GMs and they've changed coaches, but there's something organizationally that they do well with quarterbacks. Washington, we just can't say that. I mean, you got to go back to what Robert
RG3,
Robert Griffin from Baylor.
You want to go back to Joe Theismann, Mark Rippon. How about Mark Rippon?
Mark Rippon in 91 was as good as it got. So, it's just so with Washington, they may believe in him, but the rest of us on the outside, we don't believe in Washington, right? So them vouching for Sam Howell doesn't do a lot for the rest of the NFL. So we're going to sit there and say, hey, maybe we'll see, but I sure wouldn't bet a paycheck on him.
Just remember you heard it here first. The new offensive coordinator was brought in after they had committed to Sam Howell, and the coach was kind of on record that we're going to give Sam this chance. When things go badly, it will not be long before they move off Sam Howell. By week 6, the Commander fans will be saying, are we sure that accident with Dwayne Haskins was actually fatal? They will move off Sam Howell very quickly. Mark my words. There are guys that I take hardline stances on, and he happens to be one of them. All right, Tommy, last thing before we let you go. When is the next time you're going to say, all right, I have to be on top of what's happening with the Eagles today? Next week, they start some physical activities, a lot of calisthenics, drills without pads on. They're a week behind everybody else, but they'll play catch up. Is that more important? Is June 1st because the salary cap is affected by that date on the calendar? When is the next day you're going to say, all right, I got to know exactly what's going down with the Eagles today?
Training camp, right? Yeah.
I don't even know training camp now. They don't do anything.
Right.
And there's only one cut down now, Tommy. Only 90 to 53. That's it. Boom.
That's a cattle call right there when you cut 37 guys at a time. I'll certainly watch whatever videos are out, read whatever articles are out there, and follow along. But spring football is so hard to judge from an outside perspective because they're doing teaching, they're doing basics and fundamentals and that kind of stuff. You sit there and you watch it, and unless you're the player or the coach, it's hard to tell what's going on there and what real value is. Obviously, there is value, but as an outsider, it's just hard to see much, take much from that. And then you go to training camp, and like John says, training camp's not what it used to be, right? But listen, whatever changes the Eagles have made under Nick Sirianni, they've worked. And we know that the training camp stuff started under Chip Kelly years ago. The Eagles have won Super Bowls in this era, doing some of this lighter stuff. I miss the old days of going to Lehigh and seeing long physical practices. But if the Eagles going to the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl means training camp's a little more boring, then man, sign me up for a boring summer. I will take it every time. I want to see excitement in January and February, not July and August.
Check out his website, eaglesblitz.com. Tommy posts several Eagle articles and posts every single week. Outstanding stuff on Twitter at Lawlor NFL. That's LAWLOR NFL on Twitter. Tommy, always good catching up. We let you slide with the orange down there. Is that Carolina orange? Is that Tennessee orange? You don't have a green screen like us, so you could actually put green on. Johnny Mac and I got to go dark every single day because we're down at Oceans, in case you didn't notice.
This was just a shirt that had the no ketchup stains on it, so
all right.
Stuff for you guys.
Yeah.
I'm betting it's warmer down there in Carolina than it is up here in Philadelphia. I was freezing my tuckets off walking a dog this morning. Glad to see you in the golf shirt. Tommy, thanks much. We'll get you back up in a couple weeks, buddy.
Thanks, Tommy.
Hey, I love talking to you guys about the old days.
That is Tommy Lawlor. Eagles Blitz, the old days, the new days. He covers
Yeah.
it all on
It's always
his
good to
website.
get a Mark Rippon reference in, Well,
Yes.
I should have thrown Doug Williams in there as well. Joe
Ooh,
Gibbs
man.
won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks.
That's helped to stamp him as one of the greatest coaches in the history
Yeah.
of the National Football League. He earned that moniker. All right, McMullen and McDonald coming back. You got plenty of Birds 365 yet to come today.